Kyla tried to hide her feelings for Sam with shy smiles and long silences. But when he found the notebook where she wrote about him, his face hardened, and she knew something had changed between them. Before we dive into the full story, let me know where you're watching from and what time it is. Now, subscribe to the channel and let's get started. Kyla woke up with her heart racing on that cold December morning, certain she needed to get to the office early. She gulped down her coffee, threw on her thickest coat, and left the house in a near sprint. The icy wind stung her face, but the anxiety about seeing Sam, her boss, drove her forward. She couldn't quite understand why she felt this way, but there was something about him that made everything else fade away. Perhaps it was his reserved smile, or the way he genuinely seemed to care about people. Whatever it was, she now found herself standing on the sidewalk in front of the building, staring at the facade lit with Christmas lights, wondering if it was too early to go inside. It wasn't even 7:30 when Kyla pushed open the glass door leading into the lobby. The receptionist on duty shot her a surprised glance but greeted her politely. Kyla offered a quick smile and walked briskly toward the elevator. The corridors were dim, lit only by a few decorative lights twinkling near the windows, reminding her that Christmas was near. She had always loved the holiday season, the music, the colors. But this year, something different hung in the air. As she waited for the elevator doors to open, her thoughts wandered to Sam and how his presence left her so unsettled. When she finally reached the office floor, a flutter of nervousness swept through her. The place was almost empty. The blinds were still down, and the soft lighting reflected off the Christmas decorations that had been partially set up over the past few days. Kyla left her coat on her chair and without hesitation walked toward Sam's office. The glass door was closed, and the room was dark. For a moment, she felt foolish for arriving so early just to catch a glimpse of him. But she couldn't entirely blame herself. This feeling was too big to ignore. Deciding to use the quiet time productively, she opened her laptop, gathered pending reports, and tried to focus on work. Yet every time she thought of Sam's face, her heart skipped a beat. "Focus, Kyla," she muttered to herself. She needed to improve her performance since her recent evaluations had plummeted. She knew she had been distracted, staring at Sam when he walked by or replaying every word he said during meetings. This infatuation frustrated her, as she had always been diligent, hardworking, and recognized for her efforts. Time flew by, and before she knew it, she heard footsteps in the hallway. Her heart leapt. Sam walked past, glancing at his phone while holding a coffee cup. He noticed Kyla, gave her a slight smile, and waved. Startled, she waved back, trying not to appear flustered. Her cheeks flushed as she held her breath until he moved on. As always, a mix of adrenaline and embarrassment flooded her senses. Soon, more colleagues started arriving. Voices filled the cubicles, and the smell of coffee permeated the air. Brenda was one of the first to appear, elegantly dressed in heels, chatting animatedly near the coffee machine with a group of coworkers. Her confident demeanor often placed her in the spotlight. When their eyes met, Kyla felt a strange unease, as though Brenda could see right through her thoughts. It wasn't full-blown jealousy yet, but there was discomfort when it came to the woman who often stood beside Sam in important meetings. The day's buzz revolved around Christmas preparations. There was a list of activities to tackle, from organizing Secret Santa to planning the company's big year-end party. Determined to regain some of her good reputation, Kyla volunteered to help. In a bold moment, she raised her hand and announced she could handle the decorations. Her offer was met with nods of approval, and from across the room, Sam jotted something down in his notebook. Kyla felt a pang of satisfaction, knowing he had noticed her effort to contribute. Yet, despite throwing herself into brainstorming festive ideas, Kyla couldn't shake the tension. Quick interactions in the hallway left her dropping objects, stammering, or forgetting crucial files. Brenda's composed, flawless demeanor only made matters worse. Some colleagues began whispering about Kyla's unusual behavior. Once, near the coffee machine, she overheard two co-workers murmuring, "What's up with her? She must be in love with someone." Kyla pretended not to hear, but her face burned with embarrassment. She felt exposed, as if her emotions were written all over her face. Still, she resolved not to let it affect her. With the company immersed in Christmas spirit, hope lingered in the air. She decided to channel her energy into decorating the main hall, a vast space with large windows where the giant Christmas tree and treat table would be set up. Maybe she could showcase her creativity there and perhaps impress Sam with a unique idea. By mid-morning, while organizing boxes of ornaments in the hallway, she heard Sam's voice call out, "Kyla, do you have a moment to talk?" Turning to face him, her stomach flipped. His expression was concerned, but his gentle tone made her even more nervous. She stepped into his office, noticing the large window overlooking the bustling street below. Sam closed the door and gestured for her to sit. He got straight to the point, mentioning he had noticed a dip in her performance and asking if everything was okay. Deep down, Kyla wanted to blurt out, "I'm in love with you. I can't think straight." But of course that wasn't an option. Instead, she mumbled something about going through a tough time but promised to make it up soon. Sam appeared genuinely concerned but didn't press further. He ended the conversation on a supportive note, saying he believed in her potential and counted on her, especially with the upcoming Christmas party. She nodded, too embarrassed to maintain eye contact for long. As she left his office, she nearly bumped into Brenda, who stood just outside. The curious look on her colleague's face only heightened Kyla's discomfort. The rest of the day was a blur of reports and notifications that sent her heart racing, fearing negative feedback, or worse, something involving Sam. Exhausted, she stayed late to finalize her decoration plans. Browsing catalogs and jotting down ideas, she tried her best not to think about him. When she finally packed up to leave, she glanced toward Sam's office. His light was still on. Through the glass, she saw him engrossed in paperwork, looking drained. A surge of solidarity and a deep yearning to comfort him filled her, but her shyness held her back. Silently, she slipped away, not wanting to disturb him. On the train ride home, surrounded by the murmur of conversations and the glow of holiday lights flashing past the windows, her phone buzzed. She pulled it out, sighing tiredly, and read the email notification. It was from Sam, brief but clear. He wanted to schedule another meeting the next day to discuss the company's Christmas plans. Despite her exhaustion, Kyla couldn't help but smile. The thought of being alone with him again sparked a blend of hope and nervousness. As the train rocked gently and the distant sound of Christmas music played somewhere in the background, Kyla closed her eyes, clutching her bag to her chest. She prayed that everything would turn out well. Amid the mixture of relief and apprehension, a timid smile crept across her face. The holiday season seemed to promise surprises, and as she clung to the soft melody, she felt like a new chapter was about to unfold. Kyla could barely sleep. The excitement and apprehension about the meeting with Sam had kept her awake until late, and she was up long before the alarm rang. She tried to convince herself that there was no reason for such nervousness. It was just a professional meeting to discuss the Christmas party. However, her heart insisted on racing, and anxiety bubbled in her stomach. When she arrived at the office, the day was bright, though the cold wind made the streets seem emptier than usual. As she passed the reception area, she noticed an unusual buzz in the air. Some people were moving about with papers in hand, discussing details she couldn't immediately grasp. It seemed like it would be a busy day. Kyla moved forward, just in time to see Sam leaving a meeting room. He was wearing a simple white shirt, but it matched perfectly with his composed smile. Upon seeing her, Sam raised a hand in greeting and motioned for her to follow him to his office. Entering that space always made her tense. The large window, subtle air conditioning, and organized desk created an impeccably professional atmosphere, yet Sam's calm gaze made it all feel more intimate than it should. Sitting in the chair across from him, she felt her palms sweating. She tried to disguise it by picking up a notepad. "You're early again, I see," Sam remarked, glancing at some papers. "Thanks for that. We need to get ahead on the Christmas party preparations." Kyla forced a smile, trying to appear confident. "Of course, I'm excited about the ideas. I've got some suggestions for the central decoration and thought about interactive activities." "Great." He tilted his head, showing interest. "But before we dive into the party details, I need to check in on you. I've noticed your focus at work has been a bit off and, well, I know our department has been under a lot of pressure with targets. I want to make sure you're not feeling overwhelmed." Her face burned. I'm a little tired, but nothing that stops me from getting the work done." Sam nodded. "I'll take your word for it, but please don't hesitate to speak up if you need support. Now let's hear those decoration ideas." Kyla began talking, growing more animated with each suggestion she presented. She described a photo corner for employees, a Christmas wishes board where everyone could write a small goal for the next year, and more. Sam listened attentively, jotting down points in his notebook. Every nod of approval from him made her heart leap with joy. She hoped that by showing her dedication and creativity, she could make up for her recent lapses. After all, she loved creating cozy environments and engaging people in experiences that broke the monotony of office life. But suddenly, the door swung open without warning. Brenda walked in, holding a red folder, exuding the efficiency of someone who always had everything under control. "Sorry to interrupt," she said, not sounding particularly apologetic. "Sam, I brought those budget reports you requested and thought it would be useful to drop by before heading to my desk." "Oh, hi, Kyla." Her tone was polite, but there was a subtle superiority in her smile. Kyla straightened up, trying not to show discomfort. "Good morning, Brenda. I was just discussing Christmas decorations with Sam." "Really?" Brenda turned to Sam, handing him the reports. "I've also brought some suggestions. Maybe we can review them together. After all, the party is an important event for the company's image, isn't it?" Sam looked momentarily surprised by her assertiveness, but nodded. "Sure, we can combine ideas to create a final plan." Brenda's gaze briefly shifted from Sam to Kyla, as if analyzing the dynamic between them. She then began listing her polished suggestions: hiring a professional event company, having an upscale catering service, and offering personalized gifts. Her ideas were undeniably attractive and much more expensive than Kyla's. Kyla suddenly felt small, afraid her contributions would seem amateurish next to Brenda's confidence. After Brenda finished, Sam cleared his throat and checked the time. "Well, we have a starting point. I need you both to collaborate and decide what's feasible within the budget. I'm counting on your creativity to ensure the event feels as welcoming as possible. Now, if you'll excuse me, I have some reports to finalize." He stood to escort them to the door, his gaze lingering on Kyla just a moment longer than usual. "Kyla, if you need to talk about anything work-related, don't hesitate to reach out, okay?" She nodded, her face warming again. Brenda didn't miss the intensity of that look. As they walked out, side by side, silence hung thick between them. "So, Kyla, I think it's best we discuss this in person at the end of the day. You can come by my desk, and we'll go over Sam's notes together, okay?" Brenda spoke with the air of someone who had already decided everything. "Just don't take too long. I have other things to do." Kyla barely responded, giving a slight nod. After parting ways with Brenda, she felt a lump in her throat. It was undeniable how easily Brenda connected with Sam and the strategic projects, projecting the image of the ideal employee. Meanwhile, Kyla felt like she was stumbling over details she used to handle effortlessly. She tried to focus on her usual tasks, and every time she felt insecure, she glanced at her notepad filled with party ideas. She needed to turn them into something tangible, creating a positive impact to prove her worth. No matter how tense she felt, she wanted to show Sam she could balance creativity with professional competence. During lunch, Kyla went to the break room to grab a coffee and clear her mind. She wasn't particularly hungry, but the fatigue called for some energy. There, she found Brenda chatting with a group of colleagues, laughing at something one of them had said. As soon as Brenda noticed her, she adjusted her hair and commented, "Oh, Kyla, I hear you have experience with events, right? That's great because we'll need to think of everything, drinks, food, music, all perfectly synchronized to impress the guests." Kyla forced a smile. "Yes, I love organizing Christmas parties. I think we don't need to overdo it, but we can definitely create a special atmosphere." "Agreed, but don't worry." Brenda sipped her juice. "If you need extra help, I'm here." The way she said it felt condescending, as though doubting Kyla's ability. Still, Kyla chose not to engage. Instead, she picked up her coffee and walked away, determined to keep her composure. She reminded herself of her real purpose, meeting expectations, proving her competence, and perhaps getting closer to Sam, even if only as a dedicated employee. Mid-afternoon, Sam stopped by Kyla's desk to drop off some files. He made sure to remind her that her productivity needed to get back on track soon and said he trusted her abilities. With slightly trembling hands, she took the papers and promised to deliver everything on time. He smiled, but there was a hint of concern in his expression, which only fueled Kyla's determination not to disappoint him. As the day wore on, the office buzzed with the sounds of typing, ringing phones, and occasional conversations about the holiday season. Some decorations already hung from the ceiling lights, and the main hallway featured a small makeshift Christmas tree. Kyla focused as much as she could on her spreadsheets, though her thoughts kept drifting to Sam and the vision of Brenda swooping in with perfect plans at the right moment. She had to avoid these comparisons to keep her sanity. At the end of the day, Kyla gathered her notes and went to Brenda's desk as planned. She found Brenda typing away efficiently, already compiling vendor proposals and contact lists. The red folder with her ideas lay open. Brenda looked up and offered a polite smile. "Let's see how we can merge our points," she began, explaining the company's annual budget allocation for Christmas events. "We can afford high-quality decorations, and there might be room for a small live performance, but it all depends on Sam's final approval. What do you think?" Kyla shrugged, trying to stay composed. "I think it's valid, as long as we stay within the limits set by management. I also thought of something more interactive, like quick workshops or fun activities to engage the employees." Brenda jotted down notes but seemed uninterested in ideas that deviated from a more corporate standard. By the end of their conversation, they had a list of pros and cons. While they hadn't reached a definitive conclusion, they agreed to present Sam with 2 or 3 options for him to decide. Finally parting ways with Brenda, Kyla was drained. She packed up her belongings, relieved to leave the office. By the time she reached the lobby, The Christmas lights reflected off the glass facade, and the cool evening air felt refreshing against her skin. She walked to a bus stop, contemplating how to balance her desire to stand out to Sam with the need to improve her overall performance. She urgently needed a strategy to rebuild her confidence. While waiting, Kyla pulled out her phone to check emails and social media. Accidentally, she opened a message from a colleague. The subject made her stomach drop. "Kyla, just a heads up. People are saying Brenda and Sam might be closer than they seem." She read the words carefully, feeling a sharp pang in her chest. She didn't know if it was just office gossip or something real, but the mere possibility unsettled her. Taking a deep breath, she tried to keep her composure, but a whirlwind of thoughts consumed her. Was it all just her imagination, or was Brenda truly closing in on Sam? The message felt like a harbinger of an emotional roller coaster Kyla wasn't sure she was ready to face. Kyla still held her phone, staring at the message she had received the night before, the one that insinuated Sam and Brenda might be more involved than they appeared. The mere thought of them together unsettled her. A lump formed in her throat as she tried to convince herself it was just office gossip. Yet deep down, the image of Brenda laughing beside Sam hammered in her mind as a painfully plausible reality. She arrived at work early as usual, but as soon as she stepped into the office, she could sense the atmosphere was heavier than normal. Determined to focus on her tasks, Kyla placed her bag on the desk and powered on her computer. Her recent performance reviews hadn't been great, and she knew she needed to get back on track. As she opened the spreadsheets she needed to update, she overheard whispers in the hallway. She couldn't make out the words, but a chill ran down her spine. Shortly after, Brenda appeared in the corridor, chatting animatedly with a colleague. They stopped near Kyla's workstation, and she, driven by curiosity, or perhaps fear of what she might overhear, slowed her typing. Pretending to shuffle through some papers, she noticed Brenda throwing subtle glances towards Sam, who was at the back in his own office. Kyla couldn't tell if it was flirtation or just Brenda's usual energetic demeanor, but the insecurity crept in again. To distract herself, Kyla volunteered to start decorating for Christmas. She needed to stay busy and prove she was engaged. Gathering boxes filled with ornaments, ribbons in gold and red, colorful baubles, and the star for the top of the tree, she headed to the grand lobby where the undecorated Christmas tree stood waiting. Climbing a small ladder to attach the first ribbons, she saw Sam emerging from a meeting. He looked tired but alert, and as he approached, her heart raced. She tried to act normal. "Need help up there?" Sam asked with a slight smile. "I'm fine," she replied awkwardly, trying to hide her nerves. "Just trying to get these ornaments up and make sure they're straight." He nodded approvingly. "I have a meeting with the director about the Christmas party later, but it's great to see you taking the lead on this. Thanks, Kyla." His kindness warmed her in a way that caught her off guard. As she climbed down the ladder to grab more ribbons, her foot slipped on the smooth floor. Instinctively, she grabbed at the side for support, but ended up knocking several baubles to the ground, where they shattered into glittering fragments. The crash drew everyone's attention, and a chorus of "Oh no" and "Are you okay?" rippled through the office. Kyla stood frozen, her face burning with embarrassment. Sam was at her side in an instant. "Are you all right?" "Just fine," she mumbled, her voice tight with humiliation. "It's nothing, just a clumsy moment." Brenda approached, her expression a mix of concern and judgment. "Those ornaments weren't cheap," she said softly, her tone more condescending than kind. "Glad you're okay, though. Just be careful, okay?" Her words stung like needles. "It was my fault," Kyla admitted, swallowing the lump in her throat. As she knelt to clean up the mess, she heard hushed comments from nearby colleagues. Someone muttered something that sounded like, "She's been so distracted lately." And though Kyla tried to ignore it, her cheeks burned. Sam helped her gather the shards, assuring her, "Don't worry, it happens. If you need a moment to collect yourself, take it. Later we can go over the final decorations." His understanding tone was a small comfort, but the embarrassment lingered. Moments later, Kyla noticed two HR representatives watching from nearby. Their presence made her stomach tighten, as if her every move was under scrutiny. Needing a breather, Kyla retreated to the restroom. Splashing cold water on her face, she stared at her reflection. The stress of sleepless nights and her silent infatuation with Sam was etched in her tired expression. Returning to her desk, Kyla found a note from the HR supervisor asking for a brief meeting. Her hands trembled as she read it. She knew her performance had slipped recently, but she hadn't expected to be called out so formally. The supervisor's tone was neutral, but firm. "We've noticed a decline in your work recently, and we're here to support you. If there's anything personal affecting you, please let us know." Kyla assured her it was just work stress, but the meeting left her feeling worse. The incident with the ornaments, and now this. It was clear she needed to step up. At her desk, Kyla opened her notebook, a space for personal thoughts. In shaky handwriting, she poured out her emotions, her admiration for Sam, her jealousy of Brenda, her fear of failure. She recounted the spilled ornaments, the HR meeting, and the gnawing anxiety over losing her job. Writing it all down felt like a small release. Hours later, as the office emptied, Kyla stayed behind to catch up on work. She didn't notice when she left her notebook on the edge of her desk, its cover slightly ajar. Inside, her private confessions about Sam and her struggles lay exposed. The camera lingers on the notebook, its open pages revealing raw, vulnerable words about Sam. The faint hum of the air conditioner ceases, leaving a tense silence in the empty office. The notebook, a silent witness to her turmoil, becomes a potential spark for unforeseen consequences. The next morning, before Kyla even arrived at the office, Sam was already there. He had rushed in early to finish some documents, and as he passed by Kyla's desk, he noticed a partially open notebook. Curious, he assumed it was related to the Christmas party they had been planning. But as he flipped through the first few pages, he realized it was something far more personal. Handwritten phrases, scattered notes, and repeated doodles of his name filled the pages. Sam froze in the middle of the corridor, a tingling sensation spreading down his back. He didn't know what to do. Should he close the notebook, return it to Kyla, and pretend nothing happened? Or should he try to understand why his name appeared so often amidst the hearts and messy thoughts? It only took a few seconds of hesitation for his eyes to scan several lines, unveiling a torrent of feelings he never imagined could be directed at him. Kyla arrived moments later, adjusting the scarf around her neck, and saw the scene. Her heart leapt so fiercely that she nearly stumbled before reaching her desk. There was Sam, standing still, holding her open notebook, slowly flipping through its pages. Her face flushed with heat as she dropped her bag onto her chair, unable to speak at first. "Sam," she managed to whisper, her voice barely audible. He turned, his face a mix of surprise, embarrassment, and what seemed like disbelief. The silence between them was deafening. Neither knew how to start. "What does this mean?" Sam asked, raising the notebook to chest level and gesturing at the chaotic scribbles and hurried notes, almost all mentioning his name or hinting at emotions he'd never suspected. "I don't quite understand." Kyla froze. The blush on her cheeks deepened. Her first instinct was to deny everything, but there was no way to pretend it wasn't about him. Still, the words escaped her. Sam's gaze weighed heavily on her, waiting for an explanation. Panic set in as memories of humiliation and ridicule, Brenda among them, flashed through her mind. In an act of sheer self-preservation, she blurted out the first thing that came to mind. It's not about you." The words tumbled out awkwardly as she scrambled for an excuse. "Those notes, they're for my boyfriend." Sam blinked, incredulous. "Your boyfriend?" "Yes, my boyfriend." Kyla took a deep breath, faking a confidence she didn't have. "The notes aren't about you. I was just brainstorming gift ideas." Sam looked away, as though trying to reconcile her words with the countless mentions of his name he'd just seen. Slowly, he closed the notebook and handed it back to her. "I'm sorry for looking at this without your permission," he said, his tone strained as he tried to remain composed. "I'll let you sort it out." Before Kyla could respond, the door beside them opened, and Brenda walked in, her heels clicking against the floor. She glanced from Sam to Kyla, noting the tension in the air. With a sly smile, she feigned obliviousness. "Everything all right here?" Brenda asked, her eyes darting between them. "Everything's fine," Sam replied quickly, shoving his hands into his pockets and avoiding Brenda's gaze. Almost under his breath, he added, "I need to think about a few things. I'll be back." He left in a hurry, leaving Brenda to close the door more firmly behind her. She hesitated for a moment, then stepped closer to Kyla, her eyebrows raised in suspicion. Kyla clutched the notebook tightly to her chest, unwilling to explain. "Something wrong, Kyla?" Brenda asked with mock concern. "No, nothing. Just a personal matter." Brenda seemed to consider pressing further but ultimately shrugged and walked away, leaving Kyla alone, trembling with nerves. Only then did Kyla realize the enormity of the lie she'd just told. She had impulsively claimed the notebook was about a boyfriend. Now she would have to sustain that story. Feeling nauseous, Kyla rushed to the bathroom, abandoning everything at her desk. She needed privacy to process what had just happened. Leaning against the sink, she stared at her reflection and murmured, "What have I done?" Her heart raced, still reeling from the shock. The one thing she dreaded most, Sam discovering her true feelings, had happened in the most absurd way possible. To escape the embarrassment, she had fabricated a story about a non-existent boyfriend. It was too late to backtrack now. Determined to regain her composure, she splashed water on her face and returned to her desk with a firm resolve to focus on work, avoid any unnecessary attention, and pray that no one brought up the subject again. But when she entered the break room to grab a coffee, she found a small group of colleagues whispering animatedly. They fell silent the moment they saw her, but the smirks on their faces made it clear what or who they had been discussing. "So, Kyla," one of them ventured with a sly grin, "where's your boyfriend from?" Kyla swallowed hard. He's a musician, travels a lot. It's hard to pin down where he's based." The group exchanged amused glances. Someone chuckled. "Sounds like something out of a soap opera." Kyla forced a smile, knowing that the less she said, the better. Still, she felt pressured to add details to make her lie more believable. She claimed that Eric, the first name that popped into her head, was a talented musician on tour, and their relationship was intentionally low-key. The more she spoke, the more tangled the lie became. By the afternoon, desperate to solidify her story, she took an even more ridiculous step. She sent herself messages from a disposable phone number she'd purchased for emergencies. Posing as Eric, she crafted affectionate texts and ensured they popped up on her screen when colleagues were nearby. Though the idea felt pathetic, it temporarily worked. Some coworkers were impressed by the supposed devotion of her boyfriend. Yet, what hurt most was the distance between her and Sam. Whenever they passed each other in the corridor, he avoided her gaze. The easy conversations they once shared were gone, replaced by cold formality. It stung, especially since she had spent weeks hoping he would notice her. Now that he believed her heart belonged to someone else, his aloofness left her miserable. As the day dragged on, Kyla learned that Brenda would be staying late to discuss end-of-year plans with Sam. The thought of the two of them alone after hours hit Kyla like a punch to the gut. She forced herself not to react when she overheard colleagues joking, "Sam and Brenda staying late? Wonder what that's about." Feigning indifference, Kyla gathered her things and left, her mind racing with regret over the lie she'd spun. It wasn't just her personal life that was unraveling. Her work performance was suffering too. On her way out, she noticed a small silver bell hanging on the building's door handle, swaying in the breeze and reflecting the streetlights. The simple decoration seemed to mock her, a reminder that the holiday season was supposed to be about honesty, connection, and warmth, all of which now felt out of reach. As she walked home, her thoughts circled back to Sam's expression when he saw the notebook. Could he have feelings for her too? Had she ruined any chance of something real by inventing a fictional boyfriend? When she got home, Kyla dropped her bag by the door and stared at her phone, waiting for something, anything, to happen. The screen lit up with a message from Sam, and her heart clenched as she read it. "We need to talk about your future at the company. Tomorrow, 9 a.m. in my office." Kyla spent the night tossing and turning, unable to sleep after reading Sam's message, asking to meet at 9 in the morning. She arrived at the office early, somewhat disheveled, as fixing her hair was the last thing on her mind. There was a different tension in the air, as if each of her steps echoed through the corridors. It was no surprise. She had invented a fictitious boyfriend, and since then, the distance between her and Sam had grown at an alarming pace. When the appointed time came, she walked to Sam's office. He greeted her with a slight nod, signaling for her to close the door. She complied, feeling a shiver of nervousness. Sitting in the chair opposite him, she noticed her fingers entwining uncontrollably in her lap. Sam sighed before beginning to speak. "Thank you for coming on time, Kyla. I wanted to discuss something important." He rested his elbows on the desk, staring at her. "Your work performance hasn't improved as I expected. It's been weeks since our department hit its targets due to delays." She felt a lump in her throat. "I know my performance hasn't been what it used to be, but I'm trying." Sam raised a hand, signaling her to let him finish. "I know you're trying, but I'm worried. I don't want to pressure you too much, especially now that, well, you told me there's someone special in your life. I imagine that might be distracting, but there could be other reasons too." Kyla blinked, unsure of how to respond. Since the day Sam discovered her notebook and she fabricated the story about a boyfriend, she hadn't mustered the courage to tell the truth. Now his growing detachment felt like a deep wound. "It's not just that," she cleared her throat, carefully choosing her words. "I've been dealing with some personal issues, but I promise I'll get my productivity back. I don't want you to lose faith in me." Sam exhaled slowly. "I believe in your potential, but the higher-ups aren't as understanding. I've been under heavy pressure to improve our department's numbers quickly. I need everyone to be on the same page." Kyla noticed that while his voice was firm, his gaze held something different, perhaps disappointment or even sadness. The prolonged silence left her with a hollow feeling in her stomach. It seemed as though a wall had been erected between them since she claimed to have a boyfriend. "I'll do better," she repeated, almost apologetically. "You'll see." He nodded. "All right, but promise me that if you need help, you won't hesitate to ask." Kyla agreed, standing up soon after. The meeting ended on a cold note, and she left feeling as though she were carrying a boulder on her shoulders. Hoping to distract herself, she dove into preparations for the Christmas party, reviewing budgets and attempting to create a reliable task schedule. She went through emails exchanged with potential vendors, checked the venue's availability, and made notes on her computer. Despite her efforts, her throat felt dry every time she thought of Sam. To her dismay, the distance between them became even more apparent as the day progressed. He avoided informal conversations with her entirely. If he needed something, he sent an email or relayed a brief message through others. The growing rift pained her deeply, but she forced herself to maintain a professional smile with her colleagues. The lie about the boyfriend, however, hadn't faded from anyone's memory. During coffee breaks, someone would invariably ask how Eric was doing or whether he would visit her for Christmas. These mentions were enough to make her tense. On one hand, she didn't want to contradict her story, but on the other, she felt ridiculous for inventing a non-existent relationship. When she confirmed that he was still traveling, she noticed skeptical looks, though no one directly confronted her. Meanwhile, the pressure on Sam also increased as management demanded immediate results to close the quarter strong. He spent more time locked in his office, holding meetings with finance and statistics teams. In one discussion, he mentioned the possibility of outsourcing some tasks or reassigning employees to keep the department from stagnating. While he didn't name names, Kyla feared she might be part of that reassignment if she couldn't get back on track. With her mind full of conflicts, she tried to maintain her usual routine, working on spreadsheets, completing documents, and responding to the growing pile of emails. Occasionally, she lost focus, entering repeated numbers and needing to redo sections of her work. Each mistake made her more anxious, and the accumulation of errors turned into a nightmare for her evaluations. Meanwhile, Brenda appeared more radiant than ever. She walked the halls balancing stacks of flawless reports, which she handed to Sam with a professional smile. Their conversations were brief, but Brenda's careful attention to assisting the boss was evident. At times, Brenda would glance at Kyla with a vague expression that seemed to say, "I'm here, and you're drifting further away." Kyla's only solace was imagining scenarios where she might apologize to Sam. She found herself daydreaming about confessing the whole charade about Eric, admitting her feelings were a tangled mess, and telling him that, in truth, all she wanted was to be closer to him. But every time she built up the courage to take the first step, she recalled the distant demeanor Sam had adopted, respecting her supposed relationship. It felt like a dead end. Later that day, while searching for some papers in the file room, she passed near a side corridor and overheard a conversation. She froze as she recognized the voices of Sam and one of the company directors. She couldn't make out every word, but caught fragments about the department's poor performance. Her blood ran cold when she heard her name, though she couldn't decipher the full context. The phrase, "alternatives for team reallocation, if necessary," struck her chest like a hammer. When Sam emerged and saw her in the hallway, it was clear she had overheard part of the discussion. He hesitated but said nothing, lowering his head and walking back to his office with a firm stride. Later, Kyla wanted to speak with him but couldn't summon the courage to knock on his door. The wall between them seemed more insurmountable than ever. Desperate to salvage something, she spent the rest of the week pouring herself into reports and trying to revive her old organized routine. She hoped that her dedication would show Sam and management her effort and buy her some leeway. Yet, despite her determination, the unsettling truth lingered. While she pretended to have a boyfriend, Sam was right there, within arm's reach, but slipping further away. During her lunch break in the company cafeteria, Kyla sat alone in a corner. Colleagues chatted about their Christmas plans, joking about gifts and secret Santa exchanges. For a fleeting moment, she allowed herself to imagine that the holiday season might bring some magic to her strained relationship with Sam. If there was even a relationship to save. Her thoughts were interrupted when a coworker approached with a concerned expression, handing her a note delivered through the internal system. Opening it, Kyla came face to face with her worst fear, now made brutally real. Sam announced that he would attend the Christmas party with Brenda as his date, part of an internal celebration for employees, leaving Kyla's heart to plummet. Kyla was devastated upon reading the news that Sam would be attending the Christmas party accompanied by Brenda. The confirmation didn't come directly from him, but from an announcement circulating among employees, detailing who would be responsible for certain segments of the celebration and who would partner for presentations. At the bottom of the text, it stated that Sam and Brenda would jointly handle the ceremony, welcoming guests in the main hall. On the surface, it was merely a formal arrangement, but the reactions in the office made it clear that rumors of a romantic involvement between them were growing. The mere thought of seeing them side by side on the big night left her trembling. She had no right to feel jealous, having maintained the story that she had a boyfriend. Yet, something inside her screamed in frustration, as if every step Brenda took towards Sam was another blow to her heart. The atmosphere felt charged with strange energy. As the festive date drew nearer, the tension in the corridors became almost palpable. Determined not to succumb, Kyla buried herself in work. She scrutinized every detail of the decorations, reviewed supplier contracts, prepared a list of Christmas songs, and even sketched ideas for party games. She wanted to prove her worth and avoid idle chatter. However, the gossip about Sam and Brenda only intensified. Through whispers among colleagues and the knowing glances the two exchanged while discussing reports or pending party tasks. One late afternoon, Brenda gathered the team to go over logistics details. Kyla sat in one of the chairs in the small makeshift auditorium. As Brenda spoke, she exuded confidence and poise that seemed flawless to others. Sharing responsibilities directly with Sam only bolstered her posture. At one point, Brenda mentioned, "And since Sam and I will be in charge of the reception, we'll need the rest of the team to cover other activities. Kyla, feel free to choose what suits you best, perhaps the music coordination or overseeing the Secret Santa exchange." The way Brenda emphasized Sam's name felt almost provocative. Kyla clutched her clipboard to her lap, striving to remain composed, and replied in a neutral tone, "Sure, I'll see what works best with my schedule and get back to you." As the meeting ended, people dispersed. Kyla gathered her papers, avoiding eye contact with Brenda, but the latter approached her, deliberately initiating a conversation. "So, Kyla, any news about your boyfriend?" Brenda asked with a polite smile that didn't reach her eyes. "Will he make it for Christmas?" Kyla feigned calmness. "He's been traveling a lot, as usual. I'm not sure if he'll be here." Brenda gave a drawn-out "oh," nodding almost pityingly. "I see. Well, I hope everything works out for you two." And with that, she walked away, leaving no room for further discussion. Alone in the auditorium, Kyla stared into the void. Part of her felt angry for getting tangled in this lie, yet she saw no way to untangle it without becoming a target for mockery or pity. She sighed deeply and stood up, resigning herself to carrying on. There was work to do, and she needed to maintain her dignity. The following days became a whirlwind of tasks. The entire company was in countdown mode for Christmas. Colleagues chatted about gifts, decorations, and Secret Santa exchanges. Across various departments, colorful lights adorned cubicles, and plush snowmen appeared in strategic corners. For some, the mood was festive. For Kyla, it was overshadowed by uncertainty. She noticed that Sam rarely spoke to her about anything beyond professional matters. When he did, the conversations were strictly about deadlines and objectives. The once familiar glances exchanged in the corridors had vanished, replaced by a distant cordiality. One frosty afternoon, after a tense management meeting, she crossed paths with Sam outside the conference room. He looked tired, clutching a folder full of reports. Seeing her, he offered a polite smile. "Hi, Kyla. Are you managing to juggle everything? I know organizing the party is a lot." Her chest tightened. Those few words of attention nearly brought her to tears. "Yes, I'm managing. If you need anything, just let me know." He nodded, hesitating briefly before adding, "Don't overwork yourself. Let me know if you need support, okay?" Kyla forced a smile. "Okay, thanks." As he walked away, she felt an overwhelming urge to say more, but lacked the courage. She watched him from a distance as he stopped to talk to Brenda, who appeared in the hallway at just the right moment. The sight broke her heart again. Dropping her shoulders, she returned to her desk, wishing the day would end. In this turbulent atmosphere, rumors began circulating that Sam was planning her transfer to another branch. Colleagues speculated that Sam was restructuring the team to strengthen other areas, and that, with Kyla's traveling boyfriend, she might be more flexible about relocating. Though no one addressed her directly, she felt the pitying or curious glances, as if she were already halfway out the door. Each mention of the subject made her stomach churn. One evening, while organizing documents and trying to complete pending reports, a trusted colleague approached her with a cup of coffee. "I heard Sam's been talking to HR about staff reassignment. Do you know anything?" Kyla felt a chill, but hid it well. "No, I don't know. I think he's just trying to organize the department better. There's a lot of pressure." The colleague shrugged. "Yeah, people are saying it's to move you for your own development. Hope it's just gossip." After he left, she turned her chair to face the monitor. The spreadsheet numbers blurred before her eyes. Did Sam really think she wanted to leave because of her supposed boyfriend? If she revealed the truth now, it would seem like a tasteless joke. She sat there frozen until tears welled up in her eyes, but she forced herself to hold them back. Breaking down in the office wasn't an option. To distract herself, she focused on the final preparations for the Christmas party. She sent emails to confirm the catering, reviewed the music playlist, and noted concerns from staff with food allergies. Just then, Brenda approached her with a serious expression. "Kyla, I don't want to interfere, but you look exhausted. Aren't you going home?" "I just have a few more things to finish," Kyla replied, avoiding Brenda's gaze. "Well, take care. If you get sick, you won't enjoy the party," Brenda said, her tone impossible to decipher as sincere or sarcastic. "And of course, it'd be a shame for your boyfriend not to see you at your best." Kyla pretended not to care, keeping her eyes on the computer until Brenda walked away. This time, the urge to scream nearly consumed her. She needed to end this, but she had no idea how to escape the hole she had dug for herself. Shortly before leaving, she decided to look for Sam to discuss party details. She found his office door slightly ajar, but as she was about to enter, she heard Brenda's voice inside. It didn't sound romantic, just a quiet discussion about reports and deadlines. Still, the scene unsettled her. She decided not to interrupt, turned around, gathered her belongings, and headed to the elevator. As she descended, the glossy floor reflected the Christmas lights strung along the sides. It was an elegant effect that only heightened her anxiety, reminding her that the party was approaching and time to fix her life was running out. On the ground floor, she caught a glimpse of her reflection in the lobby's glass walls. Exhaustion etched on her face, sadness tangled in every strand of hair. She wondered if things could get worse. They could. When she arrived home, she tossed her bag on the couch and went straight to her computer to check accumulated emails. She needed to keep her phone on since suppliers often sent messages even after hours. Opening her inbox, she noticed one subject line that made her heart race. Transfer proposal. Urgent. The email was from HR. Kyla arrived at the office with a pale face, as if she had spent the entire night awake. In her bag, she carried a printout of the transfer email she had received the previous evening, still unable to fully confront it. As she entered, she greeted a few colleagues with brief nods and headed straight to her desk, her stomach turning. It felt like a point of no return. The proposal to move to another branch seemed almost like an exile sentence. Still trying to process it, she forwarded the email to her trusted friend Diana. Avoiding any mention of Sam or Brenda, she summarized the situation, explaining that the company wanted to relocate her and that she felt distressed. A small sense of relief washed over her when Diana responded almost immediately, asking whether the decision was truly final or if there was room for negotiation. Kyla replied that she wasn't sure and that, to make matters worse, there was some tension with colleagues. She refrained from giving details, simply admitting that she needed advice because she was scared of losing her job and abandoning everything she had built there. A little later, she decided to distract herself by checking the office's Christmas party supplies, which included decorations she had personally purchased. She opened the metal cabinet doors and rummaged through shelves full of colorful ornaments, ribbons, and string lights. Amid this festive assortment, her hand brushed against a small object wrapped in bubble wrap, hidden under a velvet red box. Upon unwrapping it, she discovered a porcelain Christmas ornament with her name painted in an elegant calligraphic style, Kyla. Each letter was adorned with a delicate snowflake. It wasn't something she recognized as hers. She had never bought anything with her name on it. Her heart raced when she saw the tag. Ordered by Sam. She stared at the ornament for a few seconds, confused. Why would Sam have something so personal made? She tried to find a reasonable explanation. Perhaps it was part of an internal employee motivation initiative or an idea for a gift that didn't pan out. Still, the fact that it bore her specific name and was tucked away separately felt too peculiar. She thought about confronting him, but recalling the tension and the distance that had grown between them, hesitated. She carefully rewrapped it in the bubble wrap and placed it in her bag. She needed to think before taking any action. During lunch, she tried to eat something quickly in the cafeteria, but her appetite had vanished. Sitting in a corner and staring at her untouched plate, she suddenly noticed Brenda entering with an air of superiority. Brenda grabbed a tray and, while passing Kyla's table, stopped. "I heard you received a transfer proposal. You must be happy to start over somewhere else, right?" Her tone was gentle but laced with irony. Kyla felt her blood rush to her face. "Why would I be happy?" Brenda shrugged. "Maybe because it'll bring you closer to your boyfriend, you know. After all, you've mentioned how much he travels. A change might be perfect." Pain and anger surged inside Kyla like a storm. She stood abruptly, the chair scraping against the floor. "You don't know anything about my life, Brenda, and frankly, it's none of your business." Her raised voice drew the attention of others nearby, who began to gather. The tension in the air thickened. Brenda remained unfazed, her stance firm. "Maybe I don't," she said calmly. "But if you insist on turning a blind eye, that's your problem. Just don't regret it later." Regret what? Kyla snapped, her heart pounding in her throat. Brenda's gaze was piercing. Not owning up to your feelings. People who don't face their emotions always lose, Kyla. Everyone sees it but you. With that, she set her tray down on a nearby table and walked away, her hair swaying as she left. The conversation had grown louder than Kyla intended. A small crowd had formed, whispering and trying to calm the situation. Feeling exposed, she grabbed her coat and headed for the cafeteria exit, ignoring the curious stares. She had taken only a few steps outside when a colleague from the finance team stopped her. "Kyla, are you okay?" She shook her head lightly, her hands trembling. "I'm fine. I just need to breathe." Returning to the office, she sought a quiet place to collect herself, but luck wasn't on her side. While walking down the corridor, she saw Sam approaching from the opposite end, likely drawn by the commotion. His expression changed when he saw her distressed face, and he stopped beside her. "Is something wrong? I heard shouting in the cafeteria." Brenda appeared behind him, her expression mysteriously serene. Kyla felt a lump in her throat at seeing them so close, even if it was just by coincidence. "It's nothing," she replied, trying to keep her voice steady. "Just a silly argument." Brenda seized the moment to feign innocence, placing a hand on Sam's arm. "It wasn't anything serious. I think she's just stressed. With the transfer and all, she must be overwhelmed." Kyla clenched her fists but chose not to react. Instead, she stepped back. "Excuse me, I need to get back to work." She hurried away, leaving Sam puzzled and Brenda pretending to be the innocent bystander. Tears threatened to spill, but she refused to let them fall in such a public setting. She rushed to her desk, pretending to type while swallowing her emotions. Later, a kind colleague from another department, Marcos, approached her with a cup of coffee. "Hey, I don't know what's going on, but I heard Sam was close to canceling your transfer. He said he thought it was unfair for you to leave, but then someone mentioned your boyfriend travels a lot, and he figured the move might actually work for you. Is that true?" Kyla's hand trembled, causing her to spill some coffee on her mousepad. "Close to canceling," she repeated, stunned. "So, he considered keeping me here and then changed his mind?" "That's the rumor," Marcos said, looking uncomfortable as the bearer of bad news. "It sounds like that swayed his decision not to push harder for you to stay." Feeling dizzy, Kyla thanked him for the coffee and cleaned up the mess. The lie about her boyfriend had now backfired, painting her as someone without deep roots in the city and thus an easy candidate for relocation. It only made her feel more cornered. Seeing the concern in Marcos's eyes, she decided to share a little without revealing too much. "I'm in a tough spot. Let's just say this boyfriend situation isn't what people think." Marcos nodded, looking thoughtful. "If you ever need to talk, I'm here." Kyla appreciated the offer. Once he left, she glanced around to ensure no one was watching. When her eyes returned to her desk, she noticed a note placed beside her keyboard. The handwriting was unmistakably Sam's. "Final meeting about the transfer scheduled for tomorrow at 2 p.m. room 3. I'm sorry, can we talk afterward?" She gripped the note tightly. The simple "I'm sorry" suggested that Sam regretted the situation but felt powerless to change it. It was clear that the transfer process could move forward without any reversal, unless she found a way to stop it. Her thoughts drifted to the ornament with her name, still tucked away in her bag. Was it a sign that, somewhere in his heart, Sam harbored special feelings for her? She imagined countless scenarios. Perhaps she should tell the truth before the Christmas party, face the consequences, and try to salvage what was left of her professional and personal relationship with Sam. Otherwise, she risked letting the transfer proceed and losing any chance to fix things. Closing her eyes, She exhaled deeply. The emotional exhaustion was so overwhelming that she could barely think straight. When the workday ended, she gathered her belongings slowly, drained of energy for another confrontation. But as she exited, she ran into Brenda standing by the hallway, a sly smile playing on her lips. "I thought you'd already left," Kyla muttered, unable to hide the weariness in her voice. Brenda uncrossed her arms and took a step forward. "I just wanted to make sure you didn't end the day without knowing that everything for the Christmas party is coming together beautifully. We're at the peak of preparations." She tilted her head, eyeing Kyla from head to toe. "See you at the party, Kyla. I hope your little boyfriend lives up to expectations." Kyla prepared herself with a heavy heart that night, as the company's Christmas party had finally arrived, bringing with it all the tensions and uncertainties that had been building up. Standing before the mirror, she adjusted the simple burgundy dress she had bought weeks ago, back when she still dreamed of a cheerful atmosphere alongside Sam. Now, everything felt different. She would have to face her boss alongside Brenda, and the looming risk of her transfer hovered in the air like an ominous shadow. At the venue, she was greeted by a large panel adorned with snowflakes and gold accents. The spacious hall buzzed with the sound of Christmas music at a comfortable volume. A long table brimming with treats and drinks occupied a corner, while a grand Christmas tree in the background twinkled with hundreds of tiny lights. Colleagues chatted animatedly, some laughing loudly, their festive spirits contrasting sharply with the tightness in Kyla's chest. A member of the event staff welcomed her with a smile, handing her a glass of punch. She accepted it with thanks, holding the drink but unable to take a sip. Her eyes scanned the room, searching for Sam. Then she spotted him near the grand tree, overseeing some technical details with the sound crew. Dressed formally, he matched the holiday theme with a dark pocket square in his blazer. He looked elegant yet distant, and Brenda soon joined him, speaking casually in his ear. The sight made Kyla's heart ache. Trying to distract herself, she joined a group of colleagues discussing their holiday travel plans. She smiled when necessary and offered brief comments, but her mind wandered. Out of the corner of her eye, she saw Sam step onto the makeshift stage to deliver a welcome speech, accompanied by Brenda, who held a microphone. Together, they were the official pair hosting the evening, a dynamic that many interpreted as a sign of closeness. As Sam spoke, Brenda stood by his side, nodding in agreement and smiling at the audience. Sam's speech was brief, but filled with gratitude for everyone's hard work. He encouraged the team to celebrate the night. Brenda then took over, echoing his praises and outlining the evening's highlights: games, raffles, and the traditional Secret Santa gift exchange. Excitement lit up the faces of many colleagues, drawn to the promise of fun and camaraderie. Kyla, however, felt out of place. She was physically present, but emotionally distant from the joy around her. Thoughts of the fabricated boyfriend, workplace gossip, and the looming threat of her transfer clouded her mind. For a moment, she considered leaving altogether, but she knew that would be too dramatic, especially after contributing so much to the event's organization. Instead, she decided to stay in the background, trying to find some solace in the music and festive atmosphere. As the minutes ticked by, the crowd dispersed into smaller groups. Some danced to holiday tunes, while others burst into laughter around decorated tables. Then a colleague invited Kyla to join a collective toast. Not wanting to draw attention, she accepted, raising her glass but hesitating to drink after a faint sip. Stealing a glance at Sam, she saw him engaged in a serious conversation with Brenda, his expression focused. Feeling her anxiety rise, Kyla slipped away to a side corridor adorned with metallic paper decorations. She took a deep breath, trying to steady herself. The blinking lights reflected off her skin, creating the surreal sensation of being caught in a confusing dream. That's when she heard footsteps. Turning around, she saw Sam approaching, seemingly looking for her. "Are you okay?" he asked, concern evident on his face. "Yes, I just needed some air," she stammered, her cheeks warming. "Everything feels so overwhelming in there." He offered a faint smile and said softly, "I understand. This year has been intense." The way he looked at her made her heart ache. For a fleeting moment, she thought about confessing that her boyfriend didn't exist, that it had all been a foolish lie. But she hesitated. Sensing her reluctance, Sam seemed to decide against pressing the conversation and excused himself to return to the main hall. As he walked away, the faint scent of his cologne lingered, intensifying Kyla's emotional turmoil. Back in the main room, a raffle was underway, led by an MC with a booming voice who playfully engaged the audience. In one corner, a group had started an impromptu dance. The laughter and cheers were almost comforting, but Kyla felt unable to share in their joy. She avoided another round of toasts and watched from afar as Brenda leaned in to whisper something to Sam, making him chuckle softly. That moment was the final straw for Kyla. Determined to leave, she remembered she still had some logistics reports to deliver. Retrieving her gray folder from her bag, she glanced at her phone. No messages from Eric, of course, because he didn't exist. A pang of sadness struck as she faced the reality of her own fabrication. Turning to leave, she found herself face to face with Sam again, as though fate insisted on their encounters. "Hey, Kyla," he said. "I was looking for you. Do we need to discuss the final details with the vendors?" His tone was professional, but his eyes held a trace of concern. "Oh yes, of course. Everything's ready in the folder if you want to review it," she replied, trying to keep her voice steady. Sam took the folder and flipped through it, making a quick comment about her notes. Taking a chance, Kyla asked hesitantly, "Is everything okay with our department?" He paused before answering honestly. "Management isn't fully satisfied, but we're trying to keep the team together. Nothing's certain yet." "I see," she murmured, unsure how to respond. The looming shadow of her transfer hung heavily over their conversation. Soon after, an announcement drew everyone to the makeshift dance floor. Red and green lights blinked as people began pulling each other onto the floor. Kyla excused herself from Sam, merging into the crowd in an attempt to stay unnoticed. But the festive energy was contagious, and before she could fully escape, she found herself caught in the chaos. A lively Christmas tune began playing, and employees formed a circle, pulling everyone nearby into the center. Kyla was inadvertently pushed into the middle, lightly bumping into Brenda. Their brief collision was awkward, but Brenda, seemingly unbothered, grinned and grabbed Sam's arm, inviting him to join the dance. Reluctantly, he stepped in, his unease visible to Kyla. The DJ announced a special moment with the company leaders, prompting everyone to clap and cheer as Sam and Brenda took center stage. Sam's polite but strained smile as he danced with Brenda felt like a dagger to Kyla. Overwhelmed, she slipped away to a darker corner of the hall, her heart breaking with each step. Reaching a corridor that led to the exit, Kyla nearly tripped over a cord connected to the decorative lights, but caught herself just in time. Her only goal now was to grab her coat and leave unnoticed. She doubted anyone would miss her amidst the revelry. A sense of isolation washed over her as she approached the exit. Through the large glass windows, she saw snowflakes falling gently outside. The sight only deepened her longing to escape. She was about to call a cab when a colleague's voice rang out above the music, startling the crowd. "Hey everyone, I saw the transfer papers on Sam's desk. They're signed." Kyla froze, her world collapsing beneath her feet. Kyla froze in place as soon as she heard her coworker shout that he had seen her transfer papers signed on Sam's desk. The chatter and Christmas music seemed to fade for a moment, replaced by a dull buzzing in her ears. The confirmation that she might soon be leaving the company hit her like a blow. She stepped back slowly, her gaze unfocused, trying to process what it all meant. Amid the noise of people dancing and chatting, a few curious glances turned her way, creating an atmosphere of discomfort. The coworker who had spilled the news hesitated to continue, seemingly aware that he might have been too abrupt. A small circle formed around her as Kyla tried to determine whether this was all a big misunderstanding or if she was indeed about to be shipped off to another branch. Brenda stood near the makeshift stage, microphone still in hand from hosting earlier presentations. She observed Kyla's reaction with a mixture of surprise and what seemed like contained satisfaction. Sam, on the other hand, set down the glass he was holding and strode purposefully toward Kyla, his expression marked by concern. "Who said anything about this?" he demanded of the coworker who had made the announcement. The man stammered, apologetic. I saw some documents on your desk. I recognized Kyla's name and thought she already knew." Sam took a deep breath, shaking his head, visibly upset that such information had been disclosed in this manner. He turned to Kyla, who remained frozen, unsure whether to react with indignation or relief. "Listen to me," he said softly, stepping close enough for his words to be almost a whisper. "This isn't definitive. We were just exploring possibilities, nothing more." His voice was meant to soothe, but Kyla could only feel a lump forming in her throat. Her eyes began to glisten with pure frustration. Everything she feared most seemed to be unfolding in front of everyone. The lies about her boyfriend, her declining performance, the tension with Brenda, and now this nearly confirmed transfer. "So it's signed but not definitive?" she managed to say, her voice sharper than she intended. "Sounds like an excuse, Sam." He pressed his lips together, at a loss for how to diffuse the situation. Across the room, Brenda noticed the commotion and decided to intervene. She set the microphone on a small table and approached, trying to sound conciliatory. "Everyone, calm down. This is just a misunderstanding. It's best to discuss this privately." "Stay out of it!" Kyla exploded, her accumulated resentment spilling over. "I know exactly what you're up to, Brenda, and I won't pretend anymore." A small circle of employees surrounded the scene, some trying to mediate, others simply watching. Sam tried to calm Kyla down, but Brenda stepped forward, raising her voice slightly. "What am I up to? What are you talking about?" "You know exactly what," Kyla exclaimed, stepping back. "Ever since those rumors started about you and Sam." She hesitated, fighting to maintain control. "You've done everything to stay close to him, whether at work or here, in front of everyone." Brenda took a deep breath, as if trying to hold back a sharp retort. The silence among the onlookers only made the situation more awkward. Then, in a burst of anger and pain, Kyla blurted out what she had been bottling up for weeks. "You think I'm wrong for not admitting my feelings? Well, I did admit them, but I lied about having a boyfriend, and now everything's falling apart." The room fell into shocked silence. Many hadn't known much about Eric, assuming Kyla really did have a boyfriend. The unexpected revelation left people stunned, and whispers began to spread. Sam's eyes widened in disbelief. "What do you mean? You don't have a boyfriend?" he asked, his voice almost breaking. Kyla averted her gaze, biting her lower lip. This wasn't how she had planned to reveal the truth, but there was no going back now. She let out a nervous, almost desperate laugh and continued. "That's right, I made it up. I was embarrassed, confused. Laugh if you want, but It was the only way I could think of to hide how I really felt. A murmur rippled through the group. Brenda stood frozen, unable to react. Sam took a step toward Kyla, still in shock. Why would you do that? Her face burned with embarrassment. She didn't want to seem like a foolish romantic, but there was no way to maintain the charade any longer. Summoning all her strength, she tried to hold back her tears. Because I didn't know how to handle the idea that maybe you didn't feel the same. And now, look where it's led. By now, someone from the party's organizing team, alarmed by the confrontation, tried to disperse the crowd and resume the music, but most people continued watching the unfolding drama. Sam remained silent for several seconds, and Brenda seized the opportunity to murmur, "I think everyone should go back to enjoying the party. This is a personal matter between them." Kyla, however, grew even more irritated, feeling her blood boil. "You don't get to decide anything here. Stop pretending you care, Brenda." Brenda exhaled audibly, attempting to stay composed. "Fine. It was obvious you were in love with him but wouldn't admit it. Don't blame me because you chose to lie." Several co-workers tried to mediate, urging calm. The tears Kyla had been holding back finally started to fall. She no longer cared what anyone thought. She just needed to vent. "Lying was a mistake, but don't think I didn't notice you constantly throwing yourself at him." She couldn't finish. The tears came in full force, blurring her vision. Sam reached out to touch her arm, but she pulled away, overcome with a mix of anger, disappointment, and shame. Unable to stay any longer, she spun on her heel and ran out, ignoring the voices calling after her. Some colleagues outside the hall tried to ask if she was okay, but Kyla practically flew through the corridors, finding her way to the parking lot. The cold night air hit her face, making her shiver. She was barefoot, having abandoned her heels in her haste. She walked a few steps on the freezing ground before finding a corner to lean against the wall, her breathing erratic. That's where Sam found her minutes later, carrying her shoes. As he approached, he saw her puffy eyes and noticed she could barely meet his gaze. He wanted to speak but couldn't find the words, so he set the shoes down beside her in silence, unsure whether to comfort her or give her space. "Kyla," he began softly, "we need to talk. We can't leave things like this." She lifted her face, revealing her hurt expression. "Talk about what? It's already decided, isn't it? My transfer. You signed it." Sam hesitated. "It's not like that. I didn't know what to do." "You chose to push me out of the way," she accused bitterly. "And now you find out I don't have a boyfriend. I must look like an idiot." He took a step closer, but Kyla stepped back, keeping her distance. The cold wind made her hair flutter around her tear-streaked face. It felt like a scene from a dramatic Christmas movie unfolding right there at the holiday party. "Please, just go back inside, Sam," she said, swallowing hard. "Enjoy the party with whoever you want. Brenda, the directors. I can't stay here." He shook his head, trying to argue, but Kyla walked past him, picked up her shoes, and headed toward the parking lot gate. All she wanted was to disappear without offering any more explanations. Sam stood there in the middle of the courtyard, watching her figure fade into the darkness. Inside, the party remained lively, as though nothing had happened, but for Kyla, the entire Christmas celebration felt ruined. Kyla ran away from the party under the snow, determined to give up on everything, ignoring Sam's calls. Kyla woke up the next morning with her body aching from all the crying. She had spent a sleepless night, replaying the memories of the public confrontation at the Christmas party. Sam's eyes, the sudden confession about the fake boyfriend, and the humiliation of having all her colleagues witness her emotional breakdown. Now, a new day had dawned, with snow blanketing the streets. but she felt utterly directionless. Exhausted, she decided to go to the office just to collect her belongings. The transfer seemed inevitable, and enduring more pitiful looks or whispers was out of the question. She grabbed her coat, slipped on her boots, and left home shortly after 7 in the morning. The cold air hit her face, making it even more sensitive after the turbulent night. When she arrived at the building, only a few employees had shown up. She passed through reception with nothing more than a brief nod. She held on to a faint hope that Sam wouldn't be there yet. After all, she wouldn't know how to face him after everything that had happened. She took the elevator, catching her tired reflection in the mirror. The dark circles under her eyes betrayed her sleepless night. The floor where her department was located was unusually quiet. Christmas decorations still adorned the corridors, mocking her pain. Each flash of red and green lights reminded her of the chaos of the party. She hurried to her desk and began gathering papers, pens, and a few personal items, tossing them into a makeshift cardboard box. She hoped to leave quickly, with minimal human interaction. As she sorted through her things, she found a small Christmas ornament with her name on it. The one she had discovered, to her surprise, had been ordered by Sam. The wrapping was still intact, and she had almost forgotten she had tucked it into her bag. Now, she reread the tag that said, "Ordered by Sam," dated weeks earlier. She held the object gently, pressing it between her fingers. It hinted at a time when he might have cared. But then came the gossip, the lie about Eric, the drop in her performance, and the growing chasm between them. The sound of light footsteps in the hallway made her look up. To her dismay, it was Sam himself. He wore a black overcoat, and his serious expression showed he hadn't slept well either. Upon seeing her with a box in hand, his brow furrowed, but he didn't back away. He approached slowly until he stopped a few steps away. "I thought you might not come," he said, his voice filled with concern. "Or, if you did, that it would be later." Kyla tried to hide the trembling in her hands. "I decided to get my things early, before everyone else arrived. I don't want to face any more embarrassment." He stepped closer, glancing at the box. "So it's decided? You're really going through with the transfer?" She shrugged, feeling tears threaten to fall again. "Everything's already signed, isn't it? And I don't have a reason to stay." Sam's expression was laced with guilt. "About the paperwork, I acted impulsively. I didn't know how to handle the situation, and management wanted immediate results. When you said you had a boyfriend, I thought maybe you wouldn't mind moving to another city." "Oh yes, my boyfriend," she said bitterly, choking back tears. "You found out yesterday it was all a lie." Sam moved as if to touch her hand, but pulled back at the last moment, as though fearing it was too late for any reconciliation. "Why did you make that up?" Kyla sighed, dropping the box onto the desk. "Because I was in love with you." Her voice broke. "And I thought you'd never feel the same. I was afraid of looking ridiculous, of putting myself out there. So when you found the notebook, I panicked and chose to lie." He stared at her in silence for a few seconds, before speaking in a candid tone. "The truth is, I didn't know how to deal with my own feelings. I thought that, if you had someone, you weren't available, and I preferred to step back, rather than risk getting my hopes up. I approved the transfer because I felt rejected." She blinked, confused. "Are you saying you had feelings for me too?" The question came out in a whisper. Sam looked away, pressing his lips together. "I think so, but I was never sure how you felt. So when I saw your notes, and then you told me they were for this supposed boyfriend, I backed off." Kyla's heart pounded so loudly she feared he could hear it. This didn't change the fact that she was about to lose her job, but if there was even the slightest chance to reverse it. maybe she was willing to try. She sat on the edge of her chair, and Sam crouched to be at eye level with her, his expression worried. "I think we need to talk calmly," he suggested. "Can we go to my office?" Kyla hesitated, but eventually nodded. She carried the box with her as they climbed a small flight of stairs to the management floor. Sam's office had a large window overlooking the snow-covered city. Daylight was bright, and people were already filling the streets, rushing for last-minute gifts or heading to work in the freezing weather. Sam closed the door carefully and invited her to sit on a discreet leather sofa. "Look, about the transfer. I haven't finalized it in the internal system yet," he said, pulling out a folder full of documents. "I haven't sent the confirmation email. If you don't want to go, I can cancel it." Kyla's face lit up with hope, but at the same time, doubts crept in. "And what about the pressure from management and my poor performance?" Sam settled next to her, maintaining a respectful distance. "You have potential. You always have. If you really dedicate yourself and find your footing again, I know we can turn this around. Year-end is always chaotic, but we can start the next cycle differently." A small smile broke across her lips as she remembered how much she loved her job before everything became complicated. "And what about Brenda?" she murmured, unable to hide her discomfort. "What was going on between you two?" Sam chuckled without humor, shaking his head. "Nothing serious. She's always been very driven, and recently she got closer to help with reports. There was a lot of gossip, but there was never anything real. She has her own life, and I think she got caught up in trying to prove she's the best employee here." For a moment, Kyla felt a sense of relief. Despite all the hurt that had built up between her and Brenda, the fact that there was no real romance eased part of the burden. Taking a deep breath, she pulled the Christmas ornament out of the box. She showed it to Sam, who looked surprised. "You ordered this, didn't you?" she asked, meeting his gaze. He nodded. "I thought about giving it to you after the party if everything went well. But things spiraled out of control. I wanted you to know that I value your work, your presence on the team, and the amazing person you are." The words came out straightforwardly, leaving her momentarily speechless. A blush warmed her cheeks as she stared at the ornament. The name Kyla was painted with such care that it pained her to think how much time they had wasted on misunderstandings. Gathering what little courage she had, she looked up and decided to speak. "I don't want to lie anymore, and I don't want to leave if there's still a chance." Sam smiled sincerely. "Let's cancel the transfer right now, and after that, we'll face management together." He placed the folder of documents on the table and tore up a few pages related to the relocation. Then he typed something on his computer, sending an email to HR to halt the process. In less than 10 minutes, Kyla saw the threat of exile begin to fade away. When Sam turned off the monitor, he faced her with a slightly uncertain but affectionate look. "And now, what happens next?" he asked, with a hint of humor. Kyla closed her eyes for a moment, letting relief wash over her. "Now, we need to talk a lot, explain to everyone that my boyfriend never existed." Sam laughed, relieved, and stood up, offering his hand to help her up as well. "If you want, I can support you in that part, or we can just let people think whatever they want because, in the end, what matters is us." Her heart raced again at the last word. This could be the start of something different, as if they were starting over. They walked to the office door, and before they left, Sam paused, looking at her carefully, as if silently asking if everything was okay. Kyla returned his gaze and smiled, wiping away the last of her tears. "Thank you," she said softly. As they descended to the main floor, they checked to make sure everything was in order. Coincidentally, they ran into some colleagues arriving, including Brenda, who maintained her confident demeanor. Upon seeing Sam and Kyla side by side, Brenda looked uncomfortable but said nothing. The tension lingered, but Kyla realized she no longer felt the same anger as before. Later, she planned to apologize for shouting at the party, even though she didn't consider Brenda a friend. Meanwhile, the office buzzed with people clearing the remnants of the party and chatting about the previous night's events. Many cast curious glances at the pair, but no one dared to ask outright what was going on. Sam made a point of firmly announcing that Kyla's transfer had been suspended. He used the official argument that she was too valuable to lose. Some looked intrigued, but most murmured approval, as many had liked Kyla before all the rumors began. Since it was a short workday due to the holiday season, Kyla and Sam used the time to organize their desks and slowly plan how to address management and the pressure for results. There was no illusion that everything would be resolved instantly, but there was now a mutual agreement to support each other. She even promised sincerely to regain her discipline at work, while he assured her that the department would provide the necessary support for her to shine again. Around lunchtime, Sam invited Kyla to the break room, where a small Christmas tree still sparkled. They stood there, gazing at the colorful lights. He pulled the ornament with her name from his pocket, now in a new red box, and handed it to her as if it were an official Christmas gift. "Now it's official," he said. "I hope you'll accept it, even after all the confusion." Kyla held the small piece, smiling, and looked up at Sam. "I do accept it, and thank you so much." On impulse, Sam let a radiant smile escape and, unable to resist, leaned in to kiss her. It was a soft, timid kiss, but filled with meaning. One or two people passing by stopped, surprised, but quickly moved on, respecting the moment. It was the culmination of weeks of tension, insecurity, and miscommunication. The warmth of the kiss contrasted with the cold outside, and the Christmas lights twinkled above them as if signaling that everything would be all right. When they pulled away, Kyla laughed nervously, remembering they were still technically at work. Sam laughed too, brushing a strand of hair from her face. Then they looked at each other in mutual understanding. There was still much to clarify with colleagues, HR, the gossip mill, and the company's goals. But deep down, they knew that from that moment on, they would face it all together. She thought about how she would explain everything to the people who had believed in Eric for so long. But Sam quickly joked, "Well, if you want, we can tell them your boyfriend was abducted by aliens, since making up stories isn't exactly your strong suit." Kyla burst out laughing, not offended. It was Christmas, and the most important thing was that she didn't have to lie anymore. She could slowly explain what had happened, and over time, the gossip would die down. Some might laugh, others might find it all very confusing, but she no longer cared. A great weight had been lifted from her shoulders. In the end, as snow continued to fall outside, Sam held her hand, led her to the decorated Christmas tree, and took the small ornament with her name from her bag. He hung it on a branch, among the twinkling lights. She smiled, deeply moved, feeling a sense of inner peace she hadn't experienced in a long time. The kiss marked the beginning of an honest romance, with playful remarks about how they would explain everything at the office, because after all, it was Christmas, a time to celebrate truth and love.